The first item on the agenda is Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. The next item on the agenda is approval of agenda. I need a motion to approve.
Motion to approve?
Motion by Mrs. Feather, second by Mr. Rogalski. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It passes 6-0, and for the record, Mr. DeMonica is not able to attend tonight. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Item A, approval of minutes from the regular meeting 6/23/2022, the special meeting 6/27/2022, approval of minutes from the executive session 6/23/2022, the enrollment report from 7/1/2022, the school police report from 6/1/2022, the school bus inspection report 7/1/2022, and the residency truancy report from 7/1/2022. I need a motion to approve. Motion by Mrs. Rogalski, second by Mrs. Feather. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? It passes 6-0. Next item on the agenda is the personnel announcements. Mrs. Duncanson?
Good evening. A few items for tonight. I have 5 appointments effective August 31st, 2022. Melissa Chanel, MLL educator at McCourt, 1 year only. August 31st, 2022, Rebecca Perriton, MLL ELA educator at Cumberland High School. Effective September 2nd, 2022, Alexis Gabriel, paraprofessional success at BF Norton. September 2nd, 2022, Miranda Gill, paraprofessional success at BF Norton. September 2nd, 2022, Katrine Sato, paraprofessional 1-to-1 at Cumberland High School. 3 unpaid leave of absences for the 2022-2023 school year for Carol Spalding, special educator at Cumberland High School, Christy Robinson, Math Essentials, McCourt, and Shannon McClure, Science, grade 7A at McCourt. And finally, I have 2 resignations effective July 12th, 2022. First is Brooke Borges, grade 5, teacher at Garvin, and Vicky Diagonelli, paraprofessional at Cumberland High School. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Duncanson. The next item is report out of executive session meeting on July 14th, 2022. Report out of executive session votes. We did not take any votes at tonight's session. Next item is vote to seal the minutes of the executive session. Motion to seal by Ms. Smith. Second by Mr. Rogalski. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? It passes 6-0. Okay, we are going to move an item up. We're going to take our first item under new business, which is the school safety update, and we are going to do that now. Chief Benson is here with us, which we are really happy about, and he has some other business to attend to, so we'd like to move this up on our agenda. And, I work with Dr. Thornton to put this on the agenda for tonight. We talked about this a little bit last month after the Uvalde shooting, and we've had a lot of questions from the community and parents about school safety, and we do discuss certain things in our open sessions. There are certain things that we cannot discuss as part of school safety, but we thought with Chief Benson, new to Cumberland, and working with Dr. Thornton, that this would be a great opportunity to give an update on how we approach things. So Dr. Thornton, over to you.
Sure, thank you. Good evening. Tonight, in your drives, I did give you a document that came out a couple weeks back. It's new in Rhode Island. It's on the screen now. You can see it there. It's Rhode Island Police Chiefs Association Committee on Basic School Safety Protocols. So I'm going to cover some of that as a talking point to kind of show you where we are, along with help from Mr. Chandler and Dr. Masterson. And then to kind of wrap things up, I will have the chief kind of weigh in on the real important questions that we all want to ask as far as engaging intruders in schools. So I want to hold that to just a few minutes down the road if I could. So before I talk about the document, I just want to try to frame it for you. To me, there are really 4 big areas around school safety. The first one, we certainly want to make schools as safe as possible, but still remain keep their identity as schools. And sometimes I know people worry about that, so we have to kind of always strike that balance. Second, we want to do things to slow down the intruder, whether they're physical things, whether they're tactical things. That's always something we look to do. Third, we always want to enhance communication and what they call situational awareness, so we know what's going on. That's an important piece. And lastly, just the constant training we have to think about doing for everyone. So those are the 4 big ideas in my head as I think about this. In the document which you have, I'll just point your attention first to the membership on this committee that met at the state level. Just so you know, the state police lead now is Corporal Nick Ravello, and just for the record, he's a parent in Cumberland, and he's the state police lead for school safety. He's a great resource. He's on our school safety team, or district safety team. We'll be meeting in August, and he'll be there with the chief and myself, other folks, and so that's a great resource we have here in Cumberland. In terms of the actual document they gave us a few weeks back, there's a category called, first, physical security. I'll do that in a second. And then we have admin action items, and then I'll go to the chief on the last piece. So as far as the physical security, you'll see on page, I think it's 4, there's a checklist of things. I'm not going to read them all, but things like, are all doors equipped with functioning locks? Yes. Self-closing devices, exterior doors? Yes. We are in the process on item C. I want to spend a minute on that. Equipping with open/ajar alarm or alert for doors. So basically, we have that in process in the trans and Cumberland Hills. So if a door is ajar, we have a computer system that tells us door 16 is ajar, and we have a system to identify that. That's happening now. We're transitioning to that as we do our upgrades, so that's something that's in process. Letter E is important. Discourage and/or prohibit the use of door chocks. Door chocks, as you know, are a fire code violation, and often we want to think about, not doing anything to be unsafe, whether it be a fire code issue or active shooter, like a door wedge, a piece of wood under the door, or they put them in the frame of the door, right? That kind of thing. So keep that in mind, because later on I'll be talking about that. We also, if you look at H, they really stress looking at, making sure we don't have too many entrances open for folks when they come in, and we do that already. We have a pretty involved fob system where we have only limited doors where folks can get in, and we really know, who's getting in what door, so that's something we are doing. In the first half of this first section, I feel pretty good about many of the areas that we're focused on. One thing, letter I, we're going to look to improve are fobs. You know what a fob is? Those little plastic things, right? We have fobs for the police, we have fobs for schools. Mercy Mount has fobs. BVP has fobs. We're going to start talking to the chief around, maybe we can figure out a way to kind of standardize the fob system and not have like 5 dangling fobs on someone's keychain. But that's something we're looking at as far as trying to enhance that process. If you look at J, we do label schools now. You'll see side A or alpha, side B, Bravo. We do that now, but there's still some more work to do on that. We have to make some improvements there, working with EMA on that. In terms of number 2, exterior windows and glass, we are already looking to go out to bid and come back to you in August for something with a vendor for ballistic film. I sent you a couple of videos, I believe this morning or last night, courtesy of the chief, showing you what can happen when you put film on kind of run-of-the-mill glass. It's pretty powerful as far as how it can slow down an intruder. So the guidance is something we agree that we want to put film on any window that would be, I think, prone to someone gaining entry. So that's what we're looking to do. RIDE identified up to $500,000 for Cumberland to spend on school safety. So we'll go out to bid, we'll get some numbers, come back to you in August, and look to start working on that. That's one of our big initiatives. Mike Chandler, if you could spend a minute just on number 3, cameras and video surveillance systems. Could you tell the committee where we are right now and what's next?
Sure. Currently, we have camera surveillance systems in all the buildings throughout the district. The transitional building here, the high school, was upgraded this past year. The Cumberland Hill Elementary School will be updated once school opens. The cameras that are going to be going into the Garvin School next year during construction, as well as camera upgrades and access control upgrades, will take place this summer for Ashton and Community. And then next summer, we're going to be doing some additional upgrades to McCourt Middle School, North Cumberland, and then in the last year here at the high school. So the video intercoms that are at all the main entrances, they have fob access as well as the secretary themselves or who's ever at the door can buzz somebody in. They then come into either a man trap or a vestibule once construction is finished in all of those locations. The video intercoms that we have currently, every building does have them, but they will be upgraded so that it's going to be a camera that's going to be recorded versus just that two-way communication to whoever the person is at that time in case something does happen. So those are some of the upgrades that we've been doing. It is an ongoing process, and over the next 2 years or so, we should have all the buildings upgraded.
Thank you. On number 4, I just want to point you to one piece. This is probably the biggest takeaway you'll get tonight. The category is interior doors. If you think back to pre-pandemic, there was a lot of discussion and action around closing doors, locking during instruction. Then the pandemic came, we ventilated and opened for ventilation, right? Now this team met again, and if you look at letter A, it says, classrooms with climate-controlled doors should remain closed and locked. By climate-controlled doors, I think they mean a room with AC, okay? So they're saying, you should lock your doors. Letter B, even if you don't have climate control, you should lock your doors. But then it says, or chalk them open. So I personally had a problem with that, because that's a contradiction to the first page. We don't chalk doors. And I'll tell you, having spoken to the chief, spoken to our town fire marshal, spoken to the state police, we're all of the opinion we should be locking. That's the safest thing we can do. Now, knowing full well, that can sometimes be change of behavior for folks as far as the classroom, but to me, I can't recommend anything short of being the safest protocol we can do. But having said that, I'll bring all this information to the safety team in August, and we'll probably bring it back to you. But that's the biggest thing you'll probably hear about in different towns, how they're navigating whether they chalk a door open or not. Some would say you could chalk it open and lock it and then close it in a crisis. But I think also human behavior kicks in, and talking to some folks earlier, what if you're kind of a little nervous and you pull the door and the chalk gets buried further under the door? So there are all kinds of things that can happen. So to me, I'd be recommending the most safe protocol we could have. So that's my current thinking on that. On communications, I won't cover all these, but just so you know, we are looking with the town as far as we know parts of Cumberland maybe have spots that have spotty service, right? That's not a new thing for Cumberland. But I know, talking to the chief, talking to other folks, the mayor, as far as getting more repeaters, what can we do around that topic? That's a conversation. We launched Raptor, and that checks off a couple of the boxes on this section as far as notification, right? As far as first responders, situational awareness, all these things. That's a good thing that we did. So the school's up and running. We're still in the process of loading the town. As you know, it's a town initiative, but the school's are up and using Raptors. That's a good thing. Yes.
Could you just maybe do a review of what Raptor actually is?
Sure. Raptor essentially is an app you can put on your phone. Any person working in the district or in the town buildings can put it on their phone. You can, in a crisis, hit a button for a medical emergency, for an active shooter, and it really speeds up response time. First responders, get messages typically from the state police barracks routed to the local, dispatch. This does that, but also goes right to the responder if they have the app in their patrol car, so it can speed up response time. Also, situational awareness. If we're locked down for a couple hours and we want to know what's going on, we can communicate outside into you what's happening if you have this system. So that's important. My next section is Dr. Masterson, just for a few minutes. Jay, could you speak just to the school admin action items, and then I'm going to go to the chief for the big piece.
Good evening, everyone. First section talks about Go Kits. All of our teachers in the district, as well as our secretarial staff, either evacuations or fire drills, they have their rosters that go out. Classroom teachers have classroom rosters. The office has teachers who have signed out, students who have signed out or late or not present, so that we can do a check on students when we reunify. Section 2 is our threat assessment teams. The district has the district safety committee that Dr. Thorne has cited a few times tonight. Every school has what we're calling a crisis team that is brought together for various situations that may take place, as well as potential restraints or de-escalation that happens with students. The school resource officer section, we are flying colors with this one. The high school has a school resource officer by themselves, and Officer Ring works K through 8 for the district and also helps out at BF Norton for their own drills, which is a requirement that a police officer has to be there for all drills that are associated with evacuations or lockdowns. Section 2 of the school resource officers is that we have a memorandum of understanding already in place with the Cumberland Police Department that is signed by the Chief of Police, Dr. Thornton, the middle school and high school principals, as well as the 2 SROs. They all agree on all the language that's within the memorandum before they start. And then Section 3 is both SROs and previous SROs have been sent to SRO school by the Cumberland Police Department. So we are flying colors in Section 3. Section 4, I called a member of the State Safety Committee on this afternoon because Dr. Thornton and I and Mr. Chandler all had different interpretations of what that meant. Essentially, what I was told is we should be training our students and our families to not monitor social media, but more to be aware of anything that they deem concerning, and that they should report it to proper authorities, whether it's school or the police department directly if it's after school hours. More often than not, unfortunately, we've noticed that in looking at various cases, and then the chief, I don't know if you want to add to it, the cases where the perpetrators or aggressors have posted on social media before they've acted. So if we have situational awareness on those situations, then we can then be informed. Do you want to add into that? Just that.
Yeah, I think you summed it up well. There's definitely a sort of a breadcrumb trail that we're finding with these cases. So any observations that parents, students, family, friends, neighbors, whatever, that they can relay that information to us, obviously helps us to intervene and mitigate, prevent. So.
I think from personal experience, we've had situations at McCourt where there have been pictures of guns on social media, and I'm telling you this because it's all public. You know, students have need to be still taught on how to maintain social media accounts, and parents have forwarded to us, and Officer Ring was very quick to investigate and respond. So we have that already in place. Response to active threat training. Our district safety committee is the school police leadership meetings that we have periodically. We'd like to have them quarterly. We do provide active threat training to students as appropriate by level. So we do train our students on our procedures. One of the things that is a common question is, do you practice active shooter training? We practice our procedures, which are determined by leadership and incident command. So if an incident command calls for a lockdown, we have a couple of assumptions on why we would have a lockdown. Active shooter, an intruder, or there's a situation happening outside the school that we need to not be visible outside. So I think that's important to note because we don't do it by the actual situation. We don't say we have an active shooter in the building. We just say we're going into lockdown. That's it. Or we're evacuating because there's a gas leak. We just say we're evacuating. We tell them where we're evacuating, and then incident command makes that call later. So. It says one of them's action C. It says provide FEMA-based incident command training. That's kind of training that Dr. Thornton, I would have. The chief obviously has it, and then we would then put those into procedures for our faculty, staff, and students. So it's not, although not everyone in the entire district has that training, enough people in leadership have it that we can act in incident command. We can look at that later if that's what we want to provide as professional development opportunity for our staff. We have a strong collaboration with with fire, EMS, and police department chiefs, as well as captains. We do provide in-service training to all of our faculty and staff on emergency or crisis, but Dr. Thorne and I have talked about, now that we're moving out of post-COVID situations, that we might want to provide some refreshers, and we've already talked to the chief about some refreshers that we can provide potentially moving forward in the first 2 to 3 months of school this year. One thing that we need to work on is guidance for our substitute teachers. That's always been on our list for an action item, and I think that this is this is the opportunity that we need to take action on that. So we'll be working on the one pager that is recommended from the state and try and get that out. We'll be seeing if there's any best practices out there to see if we can move it forward, and then also have specific training for substitute teachers that are working in our district. on other issues. And then the other thing is to also, I was going to reach out to Durham next week and work with their safety coordinator. They have a position called safety coordinator for Durham, and I wanted to see what their safety trainings are and make sure that they match ours, and then provide that one pager that we're providing our teachers, substitute teachers, to the bus drivers because they are a member of our faculty and staff by de facto, and work with their safety coordinator to make sure that we're driving. And then a facilities assessment, we've just conducted our hazard assessment for the state last month with all the principals and central office. So we don't have to update those for 3 years, but it's good for us to be situationally aware of any developments on our properties. So we're training our faculty, staff, and custodians and facilities director with Will Jesus. If we have a tree down that falls on a pole, if we have a wall that's got what's it called, graffiti on it that has a message, those are all things that we have to keep an eye out weekly for at a minimum to make sure that we see what interpret the messages, make sure we get it clean, make sure that the tree gets out of the way, those kinds of safety issues. So although we've done the big work for the next 3 years, it doesn't mean we're done.
Thank you, Jay.
Oh, I have a question.
Sure.
About the active shooter training or the training. You know, I was reading a story about the Highland Park shooting and a little girl that was with her mom and said, I know what to do. We learned this in school, run, you know, and this whole run, hide, fight. Do we teach that?
Actually, I was going to bring that up with the chief in a second as far as, if I can call the chief up?
Short answer is yes, but
Yeah.
Okay.
We currently do run, hide, fight, but I know in talking to the chief, one of the things that we're going to talk about tonight is I think there are also other more robust trainings folks do, like Alice, and that's something I think you may hear more about in Cumberland, but Chief, you could spend a minute on that first, and what,
Sure. Well, thank you guys for inviting me tonight. It's obviously a very timely and appointed topic, so I appreciate the collaborative effort that's already in place prior to me even coming here. It shows a strong commitment on your part, so I appreciate, Dr. Thornhill, your work and your staff. Yes, so on the Alice side of it, if I can give you an analogy, run, hide, fight is likened to see something, say something. It's not really something that you necessarily train for. It's a concept. It's a strategy. It's an all else fails. Somebody can kind of point to it quick. Oh, run, hide, fight. Like I can do that. Alice takes that to another level where they actually train you how to do those types of things. So what's the most advantageous way if you did need to fight back? How do you do that? What's advantageous for you to hide? What are some of the spotting things that you would notice in somebody or on the social media accounts like you referenced earlier? Any of those types of things. It's a pretty comprehensive program. It's something that's designed not just for school per se, but also the private workplace. My understanding is that I have 2 staff members currently certified as instructors. I will confirm their credentials and the like for next week, but that's the briefing that I got, that we do have 2 certified instructors that we can provide support for. And again, we're committed to maintain that, so if there's some sort of a gap or anything like that, we would send them back for their research. So.
now, Chief, here's the big question really I wanted you to touch tonight. I think everyone is thinking of the same question. Looking at the news cycle out of Texas, in Cumberland, if we have an intruder situation, what's the Cumberland protocol or position? How do we handle that?
So this is a very timely meeting for a lot of reasons. One of which is that, prior to my arrival, Chief Plakis from EMS had already established a training that he wanted to incorporate a rescue task force. So our Cumberland police officers have already all attended phase 1 of a two-phase training series on active shooter response. And I can tell you unequivocally that our response is you address the threat immediately. I will tell you that I don't know enough about the case in Texas in the sense that I don't know what their training background was. There was a time, excuse me, where a more, not reserved, but a little more a slower response is probably a better way to say this, but there was a time in our evolution that was acceptable. So I don't want to speak to their how or why because I don't know what their training capacities were. I don't know what's been taught in Texas. I don't know the rules down there and everything. But I can tell you unequivocally from our perspective, that's how we're training our people, to the point where Monday of this week. They went through 8 hours of training. They were training all day today, and they've been fortunate enough to use Garvin as the training ground, so to speak. So there's a second wave of that training that's going to take place in a couple of weeks. It's also going to incorporate fire and EMS response. You know, that is, to answer your very short question with a very long answer, yes, our primary tactic, our primary purpose is to advance towards that threat immediately.
The last piece I would just mention is also in this guidance is a piece around school construction and law enforcement. It now says, just for the records, any new construction, prior to receiving dollars from the state, we have to incorporate a kind of a walkthrough with our chief, which is a good thing, to make sure we're doing all the things we need to do. And I'll explain it this way. Sometimes architects see things a certain way. They want more natural light coming into a classroom. And Chief and I may think of it like, well, that's also now more exposure. How can we protect people in those areas? So it's kind of a yin and a yang. So for example, at community school, the new cafeteria we're building, there are some windows that are kind of on the lower side on the outside. All that glass is going to be bullet-resistant film. So that's how we're looking at all those things. We're making sure.
Can I just point check? So I didn't take part in authoring this document, and I know that they use the term ballistic film, and I'd have to dig into the actual definition of what they're terming as ballistic, but just to be clear, that film does not stop bullets. It's not something like you'd see in a bank where there's that thick plexiglass kind of thing. That's not what it's designed for. And it's actually, if you see the videos, it actually, the bullets, they fly right through it. So I don't want any misnomers of what its intended purpose. Its purpose is to physically slow down an intruder. And if you watch that video, the subject, I think, shoots 3 or 4 rounds through the glass. The holes are there, but the guy can't get through. And he's using the butt end of the gun. He's using his foot. Any means necessary, and there's a little timer at the bottom, and it can show how many minutes it takes to actually breach once those holes have penetrated the glass. So I didn't mean to, but I just want to be clear
Oh,
on
perfect,
that
thank you.
term.
Yeah. So Madam Chair, I'm happy to open up to any questions the committee has for the chief, myself, Mike
Collins?
Chandler, Dr. Matheson.
Thank you, Chief, for being here. I do have a couple questions about the technology, and maybe Mr. Chandler can chime in. First is the Raptor app. Dr. Thornton, you had indicated that the school is ready to go on the Raptor, but there's some sort of, with loading data, you know.
Right now, as I understand it, and Mike can give you more detail, everyone who's on the system has to have a certain permission, a certain license. For example, I'm in all locations, I travel around, so we loaded all the schools, now we have to load the town locations.
Will that, do you know, or Chief, maybe you know, will that be ready by the start of school in the fall?
I'll have to check with the town, I can't give you an answer right now.
I don't have a timeline for that personally, but
Are you specifically asking about schools or the entire operation? Because
I mean,
schools.
the entire
schools-
operation, because the school is okay, but if
Yes.
we need the town to respond,
Oh, okay.
and it's going to be, you know, we're going to need EMS and police and,
so my understanding, we've already back channeled to state police. The problem is that, or not the problem, we just need to make sure that it works on our end of it, right? So there are certain permissions that are required by state police because the information that travels over our network through them to the FBI, that sort of thing, is very, very restricted. It's as kind of high-end, top secret clearance, all that good stuff that I don't know anything about. That's what they get paid for. But so ensuring that we can view any message that comes out of the Raptor system, I've been told that it is possible. We just need to execute on it and open up portals and all sorts of stuff that I'm sure he could speak better to than I could about the tech side of it. So I'm told that it is possible, that we're working towards that, and we have whatever we need from state police is already in place. We have not done it yet. So,
because I was at the town meeting when they authorized it, and the presentation, it was very, very impressive, but I just want to make sure that we're maximizing this purchase.
So our intent, at least for our side of this, is our intent is to have our mobile data terminals, which are our laptops and our cruisers, to have the app active and available, so when there's a lockdown pressed on the school's end, it pops up as an alert, so it's even bypassing our dispatch, meaning it doesn't have to go to them and then they dispatch us. It's bypass, it's going right to it. Dispatch also will receive the same message, and they will obviously be in that loop, but the officer on the street should already have gotten that. And to add another layer to it, I believe there's, we've talked about them having the ability to put it on their phones as well, even as a kind of a fail-safe in case there's any kind of connectivity. But the laptop connectivity is based on a cell service anyways, so any kind of dead spots in town, it's gonna affect it equally, if that makes sense. So, we're kind of limited by that end of it, but that's kind of our plan of how it will work on our end, so.
When you prepare, though, one of the things that with the app is very important, and I think the term is fog of war, when parents are converging on the school, this will help communicate, and they're able to mark, find out instantaneously if that their child's marked safe or whatever. And I just think that's something, the sooner we can get that off the ground, and I don't know who's responsible. The sooner we can get that off the ground, God forbid we ever need it. That's the thing we want. So there's going to be chaos, but you want to make sure you can control it as much as you can.
Yeah, I think, again, we're prepared to get it going as soon as possible. It's a matter of, I think, some clicks. I don't want to understate it, but I don't think there's any of a heavier lift than that, purchasing something or anything like that. So.
I do have one other question about surveillance, though. Mr. Chandler, when you were talking about the cameras, people coming in, will the police department have access to the cameras in our building? Is that something that can be arranged?
That is part of the process that we'll be working with, yes.
And actually, that's in the document, I believe. We actually had an agreement prior, and that is the intent. I know in some communities, there's maybe a struggle over, do you have to give someone like verbal access to see the cameras or not? My position is no, I want them to have them. There's no individual sitting there 24/7 looking at our cameras for things, but I don't want them to have to stop and get permission to get real-time information. They have to have access right away. That's our goal, to give them access.
Thank you.
So happy to answer any other questions, Madam Chair.
I have a question for, it could be Dr. Thornton, Dr. Masterson, Chief Benson. I know that we don't know all of the details of what happened in Texas, but as more and more comes out, there seems to be a lot of unfortunate lessons learned. And I guess my question would be, from what you know at this time, what would you say are the three biggest learnings or the three biggest things that we would inherently do differently? You already said one tonight, but I think there's a number of things in that situation that are about police response, school building, lockdown or whatever, or internal school response.
I have one. I'll give them one. I think, if I heard it correctly, I heard the exterior door was a problem, and I think being vigilant about exterior doors being locked is critical.
And I thought they said about the exterior doors that they were locked from the outside. Didn't? But okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Just to add to that, motion? Oh, do we have power? We have power still. Power outage. What was I going to say? Exterior doors, I think that's always the thing that can get past you. I told you last month I checked all of our doors, and doors can get warped over time, can get tricky, they can get stuck. So you can just go out, and if you don't close it hard, that door is certain. You have to pull it to know your building and the principals know that. And 100 something was looked at. That's a big one to me as far as a learner. If you can slow down the intruder and lockdown, there is film on the window. Now we are locked in. and now we're buying time for them to respond. But have the door unlocked, open, really, it's probably one of my things. That's one.
Yeah, so the only thing I would just add is after every one of these situations, there's always an official report that comes out that talks about some shortfalls, some things that did well, some we need to consider improving. So I would say that that report will come out from Texas the next month or so, but we have enough between Parkland and Newtown to say that the most important thing that we need to do is continuously train, to continuously be vigilant about some of our teachers and not essentially human. We need to be untrustworthy of the around times and just be real and say, you know, I've been in this district for 18 years. Give a quick example. Like a garden, I was going to feed in 5th grade, and a woman, a parent, who's a business owner, even though I had ID, and I'm kind of principal on the south side of town as a principal, and I said, excellent job, thank you for doing that. I can just myself in. So that was for someone who actually works for the school department. So those are the kinds of things that we need to just continue.
Yeah, I think we find that sometimes too when they're in school when it's happening. And people coming and going, and sometimes people are just allowed in, you know, or are trailing behind somebody else to get in. So you're
We know what that looks like. We lock the door. We instruct. If we have an assembly and parents come to watch our assembly, it's not a public event inside of school day. It's a whole nother dynamic we have to manage, and that gets tricky where now, yeah, you are walking in with this person, and now we have to really sit with aware of, people are coming in now. That's a whole nother set of variables for us.
Just have one more. One of the first things that I learned with Chief coming in was, and Chief Benson, to his credit, the head of for mass casualty requiring police detail at a mass gathering that has a certain amount of people at it. So we had, for the first time, we had a police officer and a fire department person at a promotional ceremony at the Wellness Act. So with the numbers, and I know it's credit to the at the high school graduation, there's quite a large presence of this department. So those are the kinds of measures because of some of the mass casualties that are taking place.
I would I'd borrow a concept from colleagues in emergency management. Essentially, mitigation, prevention, and response. That's their three, and then they have recovery side. Well, specific to this, I think, you know, understanding concepts, ensuring there's an importance level to that. You know, obviously, we're ahead of the game here with collective effort here, but I can't say that for every district, right? So, you know, the term is investment. There is a dollar associated with that. That's just a reality. I think you can see potential where it could go if not properly invested well. So the extraordinary steps you guys are taking, I think, is commendable, of course. The lesson that I've learned is it's not so much on the strategy, tactics, like that's something that's kind of evolving naturally every day, every year, but it's the actual commitment where it becomes a budget line item, where it becomes something that's culturally, and unfortunately, probably correct me on the date, but I think the Columbine aged high school students are now probably some of the faculty. So culturally, the expectation from them that they grew up seeing in the news and what they expect to see in the school. That's going to take some time to kind of get through, but it's an evolution. So, I would lean.
Actually, going off of that, this would be both incident. Dr. Martin. In action, the section it talks about parent response training video. I mean, we know just because of our jobs up here, we have details about what happens in the schools. But are we talking to parents? Because I think one of the things that we talk about, the most effective way would be to reinforce the idea that are taught at school. I mean, I remember my dad coming home a couple of years ago when I think they had done some kind of training, and she goes, "Yeah, if there's a bad guy that comes in, it's supposed to throw things out. Isn't that silly?" And I was like, "I know. I just happen to know that because I watched something recently on." But is there a video? Is there something that can go home to parents?
Actually, a piece that under the section, if you saw that, ride, that's ride's homework. Produce videos by age level for us to disseminate. Mm-hmm.
So I would say, and I would add to that, I'm glad you bring that up because I think a lot of the attention, rightfully so, is focused on, the initial response, us going in, going after this threat, right? I can tell you one of the hardest parts of this, and you saw it in Uvalde, and I can't blame them for how it played out for the parents, but what a chaotic scene it is, and this is an enormous campus, this is an enormous school. If thousands of kids' parents multiply that out for loved ones who are, additional family members and whatnot, and they start converging on this area, that kind of, external layer to this, that the management of that side of this is enormous. I think it gets kind of underplayed because that's not and I'm not trying to put one over another kind of thing, but I don't want to miss that part of it. So your question about a parental training and an expectation level that they understand, like, hey, if something happens here, this is going to be our protocol as far as how we're going to notify you, where you're going to muster, how do we communicate this with you, what are the steps that we take, and I say we meaning the collection here. It's not just the police department. So, but that's a great question, and I'm curious to see what RIDE comes up with myself. But I think that is an undervalued component to this, is the parental response and the management of that side of it.
And not only that, the parental response to it, but just at home. If you discuss with your kids, because I've had questions come in from parents, my kids are going to school next year, what are the safety procedures? Do you practice run, hide, fight? Do you practice Alice? And, you know, parents just, and obviously right now it's on the forefront of everyone's minds, but just to, even if principals can communicate, this is what we practice. If your kids ask, this is what we talk about in class, and maybe if there's something like that, besides just the video, but just so parents can, at home, I mean, not that you want to talk about it over dinner, but, you know, it's just to kind of reinforce the ideas.
There's a fine line there too as well. Just, I think we've had discussions on that where having people have a foundational understanding of what the response, what the training is, but also to the point where we're not communicating all security protocols and strategies on our end is important. So there's a sweet spot right there that needs to be looked at.
I think it's important for the people in town to know, especially the parents that have very young children who have not gone through all of this, is that after Sandy Hook, really everything changed. And that's when the state started mandating like safety manuals for each building, that Dr. Masterson, to his credit and to our benefit, was, I believe, we were the first district to have our security book actually in place. Is that correct?
We had one in place. Actually, the police department managed the district safety committee. Captain Coyne started that, and then I took over when he retired. Not by choice.
But, but, you know, the school department, the police department, the fire, the rescue have always had a great relationship, working relationship, on making sure that our schools are as safe as possible. And after I think it was after Sandy Hook, the town stepped up and provided us with $500,000 to replace a lot of interior doors, making sure every single door had a lock on them, which a lot of districts around this country still do not have. Making sure all of our exterior doors were working and locking. Our schools are constantly being reevaluated with the team, the school safety committee, the police, the fire, the administration, even the state police. It is an ongoing process. We are never sitting back and thinking, oh, we're done. Because we know that we're never done, that we're always going to be, you know, taking the next step, learning new things. And our schools, again, I believe are as safe as they possibly can be. And that is due to the great work of everyone involved. So thank you, and I look forward, Chief Benson, to continuing that work with you.
Just wanted to add one thing, Dr. Thornton, on to Mr. Rogalski's point. When we think about parent communication, that is something that I have noticed parents really appreciate during a non-crisis, and I'll just clarify that situation. You're all on my emails that go home to families. And after Uvalde happened, the next school day, we had a slight decrease in attendance. But I thought it was important to send out an email to parents after lunch to say that students had lunch, they've gone to their classes, I've been through all the classes, and everyone looks like they're looking to their teachers for leadership and enjoying their school day. The amount of emails I got in response within 30 seconds of that email going out was amazing. They weren't actively emailing me, asking me questions. It was almost like they were just trusting our schools. But once I sent out the email, it confirmed for them that we're all set. So I think proactive communication is something that's going to be a focus of our safety committee moving forward, so that parents just have that confirmation that it's all good. So.
Madam Chair, if I don't want to forget one piece. In terms of, it all sometimes does come together. School construction is part of this as well now. As you recall, our high school entrance a couple of years back, just a few years ago, was pretty exposed. We now have a new high school entrance that's secure. We have that gate system between the wellness, that's new. We have a new vestibule up at the trans upstairs. Cumberland Hill opening up in the fall has a new vestibule. So all the schools, it's all coming together. And also with construction, we have opportunities, as the chief mentioned. We have a Garvin training, probably pretty unique, where we're destroying, we have 12 doors we can destroy. So it's a great training opportunity they don't often get, to actually have a real-time building to go in and do training. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's an incredible opportunity, actually. They're able to use some of, I mean, you bring it to Uvalde, the ability to breach. That's one of the big questions. Why were they just waiting? And again, I don't want to speak to their tactics. I don't know what they're training exposed to, but the fact that we're training our people the proper tools, how to use them, and we're actually doing it in a school setting with the doors that they may face if ever, hopefully never, confronted with that potential. We're also incorporating simunition training, and for those who don't know what simunition training is it's essentially, it's a, for lack of a better description, a very high effective paintball, right? And we're able to utilize force-on-force training so officers get exposure to what it's like to truly be in some sort of combative situation, but in those buildings. So when I went down there on Monday to check out what they were doing, I mean, they're working and entering classrooms, how to do it effectively, strategically, safely, working stairwells. How do you approach when there's an adversary in a stairwell? How do you navigate long hallways where you're kind of, you know, you're somewhat of a sitting duck in a funnel. So it's an incredible opportunity, and I think, again, I can't say enough for Dr. Thornton's work on that and availing us of that building. Chief Plakis's, you know, his leadership in developing that program prior to me taking the position. But it's a very unique opportunity, and I know that I've spoke to many of my staff, and they are thrilled, that they're getting the training, because they're hungry for that. But the fact that they're able to do it in one of our schools, they get exposure to that building that they may not have gotten before. And they're actually able to apply real-life scenarios in the space that they'd be going into. So, yeah.
Any other questions or comments? All right, well, thank you very much to all of you. Thank you for coming here tonight. I think I can speak on behalf of all the parents and families in town that we are deeply grateful for the work that everybody is doing to keep us safe, keep our
Madam
kids
Chair,
safe.
just one last piece. We will put the document on the website for folks that want to see the whole document.
Okay, we're going to go back into our regular piece of the agenda, which would be the superintendent's report. Dr. Thornton.
Madam Chair, just two quick ones. First, an enrollment update. In your packet, I just want to give you an update of where we are as far as the elementaries. The one school that we're a little tight mid-July is Ashton, as you can see on your sheet where we are closed right now for K1, 2, and 4. Now, that can change at any point in time as people leave. Some folks are on the books until August, then they don't come, and we have more space. Right now, by the numbers, would be closed. BF Norton is closed in K and 2, otherwise we have space. Community, our numbers are where we want them. We're at 632 right now. I'd like to have that lower still, but those are the numbers. Cumberland Hill, only closed in grade 2 at the moment, so we have space there. And then Garvin, we're open across the board. So right now, talking to Ms. Carr in the office as far as what's typical in the summer, pretty typical elementary. I would say high school, we're gaining more customers still. We got another maybe 9 or 10 this past week, so we are getting customers. I'm also hearing we have now a wait list for the career and tech. We can't take any more out of district. So we are getting more at the high school level. So I expect, as I told you, I think a few months ago, we were the second fastest growing district behind Westerly. I think that's going to probably continue over the fall.
Dr. Thornton, normally this time, our kindergarten classes at BF are not this full. Is there any consideration if the numbers keep coming? Do we know if there's kids already waitlisted or slotted to go to different schools? And if so, are we looking at the possibility of adding that third K classroom?
Right now, no one waitlisted right now, but always, as you know, BF has that dynamic, and if I have to come to you in August with an unbudgeted FTE, we would do that to make the numbers where they have to be. But in terms of the budget push and pull, prior to June 1, we don't want to staff a third kindergarten and have it if we don't have to have it. But right now, we fit, but we're big. But if we get bigger, yes, we'll come back to you in August with a third section of BF kindergarten. Second item, Madam Chair, is school construction. Just a quick update. As always, I cover that with you. Cumberland Hill is moving along. If you do want to walk with me next week, please let me know. You're seeing all the heating units are now in, all the new heating system. The doors are on. The classroom ceilings are being flooded, as they say. It's called being flooded, the tiles in. They flood them. They're being flooded. The hallways are being dressed up with new bulletin boards. Those are in place. Painting is continuing. The exterior electrical, the trench work has been completed, it's buried. There's now an apron or a cement square for the new power to go on, that's all in place. So it's moving along. We only had one slight curveball today. There is one hallway adjacent to the gym that may have to be closed for about maybe 5 to 7 days. There is a unit on order, back ordered with, with the pandemic type of delivery situations. So that may not open, that one hallway. There's an easy workaround for that week. So we're not worried about that, but it is, nothing's ever perfect. But all the classrooms are scheduled to open, all the common areas are scheduled to open. But that one hallway, it might be around, say, 25 feet. That might have to be sectioned off. So that's as of today at 1:30. That could change, and we get good news next week, but that was as of today. Also, the last thing, Garvin tomorrow, the bids are opened, so we find out who bid on Garvin, and then that would come to the committee first meeting in August, Mr. Pignano, for Garvin to accept the, yep. So that should be exciting to get Garvin off the ground as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Thornton. Are there any events yet planned, like for the public, or for the families of Community Hill, Cumberland Hill, to see the school ahead of
Yep. Nothing
official
planned.
opening?
Right now, it's really a race to finish. The construction folks tell us right now, the date for us to get back the entire building is August 26th. So as we get closer to that, and that looks more likely to be the exact date, then we can start planning those events. We also need what's called a CO, where you can occupy the building. If you don't have that, you really can't be in the building. So we need the certificate, and then we can start planning. But yeah, as we get closer, I think we have a better sense. Right now, it's July, 14th today? Right? So yeah, a few more weeks, I think we'll know more, but we do want to give folks a chance to get in there to walk around and see what we did.
Okay, moving into the next part of our agenda, reports of standing committees. Item A, Fiscal Management Subcommittee update. Mr. Collins?
Good evening, Madam Chair. Good evening, committee. The Fiscal Management Subcommittee met this evening. We have payment in the bills for just over $2 million. We have 12 resolutions for the committee tonight to vote on. And just a couple things. Food services had a record year, as we have learned. And facilities is already working hard to get the buildings ready for next year, if you can believe that, and get everything shiny and new again. So the only other thing would be the office monthly report. We're still waiting in for the final numbers for June, so we didn't get the full report. We often do. We'll get that next meeting, and I think that's it. So just the resolutions and the payment of the bills coming to the committee shortly.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Next, the Policy and Procedures Subcommittee update. Mr. Fiorella?
Policy and Procedures was able to meet on Tuesday night. We amended and passed two policies, J2, student attendance, which had an issue that was created by COVID that we addressed and then was being taken advantage of by a select few, so we had to correct that. And we will discuss that further later on in the agenda. E2, transportation, we made a small change to that, which, although it's a small change, it was kind of the procedure for a while anyways, but we've just locked it down a little bit, and we'll discuss that further later on the agenda when we vote on it.
Thank you. Next, the Achievement and Communications Subcommittee update. The subcommittee did meet this week, and Mr. Damana shared with us the dense and detailed strategic plan with inspiring goals, backed up with a lot of data, and so much that we want to share with everyone. But we are going to meet next month and go over it in more detail. We weren't able to get through all of it, and then bring it to the school committee, the full school committee, so everyone can see and ask questions. And then we'd also like the town council and other stakeholders in town to understand what our strategic plan is, so that we can all kind of be aligned of where do we want to be in 2025. And, a big focus, of course, is around achievement and getting us to the pre-COVID achievement levels. which we think with a lot of hard work is definitely achievable. And we look forward to seeing some of our earlier results later this year. So a tremendous amount of work has gone into the strategic plan. We'll review again and then definitely start communicating it and sharing it with stakeholders across town. There'll be important aspects of this plan that need to be aligned with our budgeting priorities and making sure that any decisions that we're making around our budget are aligned to what we want to achieve in our plan as well. So we can get a kind of laser-like focus on where we want to be in 2025. So a tremendous amount of work by Mr. Devana and his office, so thank you for all of that. We look forward to learning even more. The next item is the District Health and Wellness Subcommittee update, which does not meet in the summer, I believe, Mrs. Rogalski. Okay, all right, thank you. The next item is a public hearing, the reading of amended policies J2, student attendance, and E2, transportation. Those
I would just ask that they get read into the record.
will be read into the record. And along with that, we have public comments related to those specific policies, if any member of the public would like to speak on those two policies. Seeing none, we will move to the next item, which is our general comments from the public. If anyone from the public would like to speak, you can come up and speak. Oh, Mr. Kinch.
Thank you. I just wanted to give you an update. I gave Mr. Thornton an email about the achievement committee that we're trying to put down, or a discussion. So I'm almost settled with that. Of course, Mr. Thornton and Mr. Pagano are going to go on, as long as your head of finance chair got a confirmation. I'm waiting for confirmation from one more. The mayor has agreed, as well as our finance chair has agreed. So we may be discussing that a little more Wednesday, and I'll have that confirmed. So it'll probably be just a discussion. I don't know if someone wants to come down and join us, but Doctor, I'll update you prior to Wednesday, so there's you know what direction we're going in. All right, thank you, guys.
Excellent.
Sorry for being late. I waited for the police to leave.
Thank you, Mr. Kinch. The next item on the agenda is new business. We already took the school safety update so that Chief Benson could get to the other business he needs to attend to. So we had a really good, extensive discussion on that. Next item under new business is discussion and or vote to approve amended policies, J2 student attendance and E2 transportation. Mr. Fiorello.
Hello. J2 student attendance. During COVID, we had to update the policy. RIDE asked everyone to be a little more lenient with their excused absences. So we had added some language which allowed a parent to essentially call in their student sick and be allowed to have up to 2 consecutive school days to be unexcused. And that served us pretty well during COVID, when we wanted parents to make sure that their kids stayed home if they had any kind of symptoms. However, post-COVID, what it turned into is we've had some students missing a lot of work. I mean, a lot of school days. So we've needed to remove all of that language, and we've also removed all the language surrounding the hybrid and distance learning, because we are hoping to never have to do that again. We've also added just some philosophical language about how important attendance is. Unless there are any questions, I would move passage. Oh, this policy was actually brought to us by the principals of Garvin and B.F. Norton. And I'm sure that it was issues in other parts of the district as well. So I would make a motion to approve this.
So Mr. Fiorello makes a motion to approve. Do we have a second for discussion? Second by Mr. Collins.
I do have a question. Prior to COVID, there was an issue with doctor's notes. So if a kid has a fever, parents reached out to us. This was right before COVID, and it was like, Susie has a fever. You're required to keep a kid home for 24 hours with a fever, but they needed a doctor's note, and that becomes kind of burdensome. That becomes burdensome for the parent, because now they have to get into the pediatrician's office for the pediatrician just to tell the kid they have a fever. Here's your note. So they're paying, you know, 20, so does this policy revert back to that old policy in which parents have to get doctor's notes for something that's, you know, parents can easily just manage at home, a little bit of orange juice and bed rest?
Yes, it does revert back to the old language, but I would say, as a parent of 2 kids who went through the school system, if your kid is going to miss a day of school, there's really no need to get a doctor's note. Keep the kid home. The principals, the staff of these schools, they know which students never miss school. Our policy is really about the kids that are missing a lot of days of school. Because even after 5 days of absences within, I believe it's a semester, or a trimester, I forget what the language actually reads. The most you're going to get is a letter, just making sure the parent knows that the student has missed some days. This is not something that the average family really needs to put any concern into, really. And when we had that, and when we first initially made the change, we were having a problem with attendance. The policy really did clean up our attendance issue that not just us, but a lot of districts were having at the time. And our policy really does follow the guidelines from RIDE. So,
Mrs. Feather.
Hi. So a couple of questions, and I apologize for not being able to be at the policy meeting on Tuesday. I was traveling for work. I take issue with us, and as everyone can see, I'm like a mask person, but I take issue with us calling it the post-pandemic period. We have people getting COVID every single day, and we've got the most transmissible variant that we've had with BA.5 happening right now. I'm concerned that we are going to have kids out for COVID. They've got to be out for 5 days at least. And that's actually really pushing it, because my kid actually tested positive after 5 days still. She missed 2 weeks of work, or 2 weeks of school, but was working her tail off at home even while sick. I am very concerned with this policy because of, you know, parents not being able to manage their own children's health and having a socioeconomic issue pop up. It's not economically fair for us to say to some of these parents, you need to go to the doctor. You've got, you know, your kid's out for 3 days because they're puking all over the place. The doctor's going to say they don't want that. And it's an unexcused absence. I understand that it's an unexcused absence at that time. I'm a parent that has had kids who do have, well, at least one of my children does have medical issues where every now and again he is out. I got a letter a couple of years ago saying that they were going to take me to family court, saying that Cumberland was going to take me to family court because my son had missed 15 days of school. He missed, 5 because he had Lyme disease in the fall, and he missed some other, and then at the end of the school year was COVID. So this is very personal to me because I've seen what happens, and I understand the stress a parent has when they're getting these letters and saying, and everyone tells you, don't worry about it, they're never going to do anything about that, or, but it does. It's a tremendous amount of stress. So this actually really, really worries me, reverting back to the old policy.
I understand your concern. However, considering the attendance issue that we had prior to the enacting of this policy,
Do you have the stats? Sorry, Mark.
we had stats, 4 years ago when we did it. But I'll tell you right now, our numbers plummeted for attendance, and not just ours. It happened across the state. And again, if you have an issue, if you're concerned, call your building administrator and talk to them. Because again, these parents know, and a lot of these letters are generated automatically. But the problem is that this really does solve a huge problem that we have had consistently over the years, and not just us, every single district in the state. And attendance, school attendance in general, across the country has been a problem on and off over the years, and this is the only way to do it. And again, these are RIDE's guidelines. They consider anything to be unexcused, really, with very few exceptions. So what we did do was we addressed a lot of the concerns that the parents had at the time, and for years, we have not heard very many complaints about this policy, and and I won't speak to your particular circumstances.
Madam Chair?
I understand that. I would actually really like to see the stats beforehand and after. And also, I would like to ensure that we are not sending a letter to parents off and threatening them with family court, because I do think that is a big concern. I also would like to speak to local pediatricians, because again, anecdotally, speaking to Lincoln Pediatrics, where I go, they saw an influx of students coming in when we enacted this policy. I remember I asked them specifically about it because, as you know, I was very vocal about it. And I wonder whether or not we are going to get that same sort of influx of patients within our local pediatricians' offices again, and also the socioeconomic concerns about it. I don't think it's fair.
Mr. Collins?
I'm looking at the policy, and I do see in there, under excused absences, doctor's written excuse must be submitted upon return to school. Again, I do feel like this places an unnecessary burden on parents who have to take a day off of work because their kid's temperature was 99. I understand the spirit of the policy, but with that present in the policy, I can't really support it. And I also, I look at my own scenario as Mrs. Feather does. My wife's a nurse practitioner, and Mrs. Rogalski's husband's a doctor. We can't write doctor's notes for our own kids. So a medical professional, my wife can assess the child at home, yet one of us would have to take the day off to get a note to tell us what we already know. So, and then again, there's the financial burden of parents who have to pay co-payments and, you know, all this other stuff. I think parents who know what's best for their kids, which is to be in school, and they know when to keep their kids home when they're ill. I know, as a teacher, I see it. Kids come in sick, parents send the kids in. They make a mistake, but I worry that this blanket policy is gonna punish people for doing their job as a parent. Otherwise, and it really, my hang-up is doctor's written excuse must be submitted. And it places unnecessary burden on the doctor's offices. Those places are mobbed anyway. And if you're worried about your kid getting sick, that's the place they're gonna get sick. Doctor's offices are not filthy, but it's a germ factory. So, I mean, that's my only hang-up, and I understand the spirit of it. Attendance does have to go up, but I think that's an unnecessary burden. And I got complaints about that prior to, I don't want to say prior to COVID, because Ms. Feather points out it's still going on, but before the outbreak in 2019.
I just want to add two things. The doctor's note being required upon return. The problem was we were getting doctor's notes weeks after the fact, or when report cards were coming out, and parents all of a sudden were, getting their doctors to fill out forms that they never should have done, 3 months earlier. That's why that language was added. And quite honestly, I understand completely about parents are the best people to monitor their children. However, too many parents do not consider school attendance a priority in their student's life for whatever reason. And this policy holds the parent accountable to do their job that is required under the law to send their kids to school. Kids that are missing a couple of days here and there are not the issue. The parents are not the issue. The principals know which kids are have problem attendance. That's what this policy does, and this is the policy the Department of Education wants us to have.
Dr. Thornton and then Mrs. Rogalski.
Just a quick thought. I think I hear good points on both sides, but I am mindful that RIDE says over 18 days you are chronically absent. And to Mr. Friola's point, attendance does matter. So I think policies are written for the mean, or we always have the examples on both extremes, right? But I think policies are written for the mean. So what policy can you adopt that really, strongly encourages attendance, right? And doesn't give, ways to game the system. That's really the challenge, I think.
Mrs. Rogalski?
I just want to echo what Mr. Collins said. I do understand the spirit of it, and I do agree we should encourage attendance, and obviously attendance is extremely important. However, I just think it places an unfair burden, and being realistic, the parents who were never going to get a doctor's note are still not going to get a doctor's note. And what we're doing is we're placing this replacing this burden on single-parent families who have to now take their kids to a doctor, maybe our lower socioeconomic status families that have to do co-pays more than once. I think you're also gonna encourage parents to send their kids to school sick because they don't have the time to go to a doctor and get the doctor's note. Because those are the families who will care about having the excused absences. And these are the families that we're affecting. The students who don't care and the parents, not don't care, that's not the right wording, but the parents who don't make attendance a priority, I don't think this is going to force them into making a priority, or it's probably not enough of them. And I worry that while the spirit is good, and while it might be what RIDE wants, I just worry about what it's forcing on some of our families.
Smith?
I understand what everyone is saying, and just a couple of things. This policy has been in place. The change was made going in with COVID that we were allowing a parent's note to come in. There are cases that we have seen that it's after 2 days. So a parent would take the child out for a few days, and then put him back in, then take him back out and put him back in, or not really enforce it. So there was constantly bridges. I'm not aware of a major issue happening with this policy prior to the change that we had made already to allow parents with the note. I mean, there's unexcused absences, and that's where they would fall. If they're not into the doctor, they'd fall into an unexcused. We're not looking at those situations where many people would be impacted. We have to look at the whole good of what this does for a larger portion of our students. So I completely agree and understand with what you're saying, but what we're doing is taking this back to a time where it was working and it was uniform with minimal issues.
Mr. Collins, and then Mrs. Feather.
I had a problem with this before the change, as I already indicated. But also, if we're using this policy to compel parents who are otherwise using the policy to cover for their kids, the issue is not the school and the issue is the policy. It's more of a social services issue with that family itself. Whether they have a note or not, there's going to be an issue. Social services has to get involved and figure out what's really happening. If the schools suspect that parents are, I guess the implication is lying about whether the kids are sick or not, I think that's beyond our reach. I think we have to refer them or do something else outside of our jurisdiction. So I just think, I don't want to, again, punish families for parents who are doing the best thing, keeping their kid home. I worry that we're missing sight of, we want kids in school, but if we're forcing kids in with a policy, I don't know if that's the best route to go.
Mrs. Feather?
Just to reiterate, COVID is, I know I've said something like this before, but COVID is still a thing, and we will have kids who will be out for 5 to 10 days in September. And then if they miss any other days throughout the year, then their parents will have to get doctor's notes, because if they're out for 10 days in September, then they're close to that 15-day threshold. COVID is still an issue. And frankly, I have seen kids who do try to go back. My daughter is a stellar student. She tried to go back after 5 days. She made it 2 hours before she collapsed in the nurse's office. So I'm very frustrated that we're treating it like the pandemic is over. Things are not the same as they were in 2019.
These absences are not, 5 unexcused absences don't count for the entire year. It is for, I believe, the grading period or the semester. I can't find the language right now. So during that period of time is when it kind of resets. Again, the problem is if we don't have any standard, then parents can do what they want, kids will lose time, and we will have no leverage, no recourse of action, because we won't be able to say, well, you've missed 10 days. This is why we're doing an investigation. This is why we're calling you in to find out what's going on. And just for the sake of argument, if a kid starts missing a lot of school days, it's taken out of our hands. Am I correct, Mrs. Duncan? Can you speak to when we're basically taken out of the equation and the DCYF gets involved?
You mean, so when somebody has an excused absence, they're not flagged in the system is what I think you're getting at. When they're unexcused, we have the ability to put those social services in and start processes that weren't otherwise available because they're technically compliant with the rules. Yep. So unless it's an unexcused absence, we can't start triggering the processes. And, you know, I think it's the word unexcused that I think is the hang up here. I think that we're all rule followers and we don't like to have unexcused things on our record, but in fact, like a small number of unexcused absences is an acceptable thing. It's almost expected. I think my daughter had 3 last year because of fever or whatever, and we didn't go to the doctor, and that was fine. I didn't get a letter or anything like that. But the stigma behind unexcused, because I think I can speak for the group, are rule followers, and we like to not have any unexcused things on our record. But in fact, it's an expected thing, so maybe we can't rename it because that's what RIDE requires us to call it. But that is a trigger that allows us to, in the circumstances where there is abuse or there are patterns, for us to start that process. Steve can probably speak to that.
One thing I would say, though, is, I guess the scenario I'm using is when the kid has the 24-hour, the kid's thrown out in the middle of the night, and then you got to take them. I would support a policy as long as it's after one excused absence, so on the second day. So if the kid is absent more than one day, then there is something they have to go to the doctor for that maybe, if the fever is longer than a 24-hour thing. I support maybe after one day. I just think it's that one, the kid was thrown up because they had, they ate too much or they ate too many blue slushies or what, drank too many blue slushies and threw up. I mean, do you really have to go to the doctor for that? But if it's a chronic thing where the kid's off for 48 hours now, then I would feel differently. Because I do understand the spirit of it. But I just don't want to place a burden on families.
But then we'll actually end up having parents keeping their kids every other day. One unexcused absence inside of a week is not a big deal.
Well, then
You
if
don't
you-
even get a letter until you get 5 unexcused absences.
But if you see that, then they're clearly gaming the system and you have to get truancy involved or something.
Right, but we need to have a policy in place in order to enact all the other measures. We can't just have it be willy-nilly. This is why we have this policy. All you get, after 5 unexcused absences, you get a letter saying, hey, your kid was out 5 days. Are you aware of this? This is what it's about. This policy has worked very well over the years. I know some people get wrapped up in the unexcused absence, but I got to tell you, if my kid was out for a day or two, I would never bother going to the doctor. I call the principal or I call the building secretary or whoever, and I say, my kid's sick today. They'll probably be in tomorrow or the next day. Okay.
Okay, Ms. Smith would like to say something, and then I'd like to invite Dr. Santa up to speak too.
I just want to really pull attention to the wording on this. I think it's important because when you're looking at 15 unexcused absences, or the combination thereof with tardiness or whatever it may be, it doesn't state that it's going to be taken to court. It says a referral may be made to an attendance officer. But at this point, there's already been communication that should be ongoing, and it's in there. There's conversations, there's telephone calls, there's mail, there's, email, whatever it may be, occurring with the parents. So there should be an understanding already in place, I think as we discussed earlier, contacting your building administrator or whomever it may be. So these things should already be in place so that it's not a situation that we're sending it out blindly or the system, flagged it and said, oh, that was 5 unexcused and automatically sends a letter. It should be the involvement with the school, and that's how it's being managed. So I think the wording is important to look at. We're not just putting it out there and saying, oh, you're going to be unexcused, you didn't go to a doctor, therefore we're going to punish you for that. We're not looking to punish families.
It's also important to note that we also addressed another concern that parents had, that we actually had on the committee at the time, was when a school nurse actually sent the child home on, say, a Tuesday, and then the kid was out for the Wednesday and Thursday. Those are considered excused absences because the school nurse did send them home. So that kind of alleviates some of the problem as well.
Okay, Mrs. Feather and then Dr. Santa.
Not to muddy the waters here, but I guess to muddy the waters, we're also within the policy is the whole, 3 tardies equals an unexcused absence and things like that. So now you got a kid who can't get around to the high school and, and has 3 tardies and that equals an unexcused absence, and now they've got a 25-day social, social suspension. So I wonder, I'm a data person, and I would love to see the numbers before we enacted the policy, the numbers after we enacted the policy, and also what our expectations are. How bad is the problem right now? Because I'm not seeing any numbers around this.
I think there's an extreme either way. There's lots of extreme and outlier cases to all of this, and actually some of the problems were discussed at the meeting, the subcommittee meeting on Tuesday night. But clearly, we don't all have a good understanding of the impact that it's having and the data, if there might be some. But I would like to invite Dr. Santa up. I think she has something she'd like to say.
While she's walking, I just want to say, we went over that tardy formula excruciatingly during the time of rewriting this policy.
So I think maybe the issue is around the terminology of unexcused, because unexcused sounds like that they didn't have a good reason not to be in school. So maybe we can look at the terminology. But if I can tell you about the absenteeism, we're not talking about the kids that are absent 5 or even 10 days. The first step is they get a letter. And usually we have a phenomenal truancy officer, Jackie Hooper, who goes out. She may go out to the family. She reaches out almost like someone like a social worker, or she may take a social worker or a school psychologist out to the home to see what is going on. But I think looking at data would be helpful, because we have kids who have missed 56 days, 70 days, 90 days, 100 days this year. And it has been a problem in the past, and it has been horrible this year. And then I'll give you a scenario what happens. So let's say a student's in 8th grade. They miss a lot of school because they stayed home. Then they get doctor excuses for not being in school. There might be a legitimate reason, there may not be a legitimate reason, or it might be in between, right? Then we get to the end of 8th grade year, but they're not able to meet the standards to go to 9th grade. But the family thinks, well, because I have a doctor's note, they should be able to go on to 9th grade. But we know they're not prepared to go to 9th grade because they can't do the work. They don't know how to be, active students. They don't know how to do any of do their homework, all those components. So, we make an agreement, let's give them the end of the year prompts and see how they do, and really terrible, terrible scores. So in the parents' mind, when they get the doctor, a lot of our parents' mind, not all obviously, when they get their doctor's note, they think that means free pass, you don't have to do the work. You can just go on. It's like a free day, and there's no expectation of completing the work or getting what they need to. So the kids are coming very much unprepared. And I think if you looked at the data of our elementary to middle to high, you're going to see that the kids are not doing well going into those next grade, have an extensive amount of absences. So we're not talking about the typical family where you have a kid that's out I've had a kid out with Lyme's disease. I know exactly what you're talking about. I've had a kid out for COVID. COVID's kind of a separate thing. You have a test that says you have COVID. There's evidence there. We're really talking about the families that are utilizing the policy against the district to excuse their kid to be in and out of the school, in and out every other day, all the day. And really what it does, it pushes us at the 5 days to start intervening with the family. It's not really about punishing. There's nothing you can do. And I'm going to say it on record, really honestly, when they go to truancy court, nothing happens unless you're scared of a judge. I mean, if you're scared of a judge, maybe something happens, but really nothing else happens at truancy court. If there isn't, nothing happens there. They get told to go to school. They're told by a judge to go to school. That's what happens. I've gone too many times. Nothing really happens. It's only when it becomes extensive over years that something may happen, and DSWEP is sitting in court, and they may get DSWEP involved. if we have a truancy officer involved at that 5-day period and at the 10-day period, and the truancy officer is informing us, she emails me, she talks to the principals, we have like a group conversation about what's going on. We start looking at, is there something else we need to do? It alerts me if I need to start providing homebound tutoring because it's a medical issue. All those things start happening. If we start taking away those early alert systems, I'm very concerned that we're going to lose kids through the cracks because we won't know what's going on. This just helps us to inform that. It also helps us to show that we are trying to intervene if we end up in court. But ultimately what happens in court is over years and years and years and years. I mean, I've had kids miss literally 172 days of the school year and nothing happened. So I think that's what you have to look at. And maybe looking at the term unexcused, because I can understand the concept, well, of course it was excused, they were sick, right? Think of a different term for that. But I would really wish that we have a strong policy so that the message is clear, that you're supposed to be here and not manipulate the system to excuse. And this is the other thing too I want to say. If you don't have a policy in place and then you're trying to do anything with truancy and you go to truancy court to get additional assistance or another layer and you don't have a policy that supports it, they're going to throw it out. They're going to say, well, your policy says 10 days, 15 days, whatever that is what's going to be followed. So you have to have something pretty strong and to give us those early alert systems. That's it. I'm pretty passionate because I've spent too many meetings this year on attendance and even worse, wanting to be referred to special ed because they're not coming to school when a lot of times it's not a special ed issue at all. It's not even an anxiety issue. It's just an I don't want to issue. Other cases of anxiety and other issues, sure, but a lot of the cases where I just don't want to. I didn't have to last year. I got to stay home. Why can't I just stay home now? Too much of that. So I know it was long, but I'm pretty passionate about it. I was like dying back here.
Thank you, Dr. Santa. It does, this is, as we can all see, a contentious and complicated topic. And, and I feel, there's a lot that I feel the same way about too. If my son or daughter was sick and I have to bring them to the doctor so that it will be an excused absence. But I think there is that messaging about unexcused absences, that it is okay to have unexcused absences. It doesn't feel that way though. And I think in the way that sometimes the policy is written or things that happen, that we all feel like we have to take our kid to the doctor for one day to pay a $30 copay to get a doctor's note to get an excused absence. And I think that's probably likely what we're mostly reacting to is that piece of it. But I do see Dr. Santa's point about the early alert system. There are kids in our system who need this kind of policy in place in order to enable us to be able to intervene when we need to intervene. Anyways, we have a motion and a second on the table. So we will take a vote and we will take a roll call vote. And I'll go in order, down. Mrs. Rogalski. Aye. Mrs. Feather. No. Mr. Fiorillo. Aye. Mr. Collins.
Aye. Yes.
Ms. Smith, second. Aye. And the chair votes yes. So it passes 5-1. Thank you. The next item on the agenda, Mr. Fiorillo, is E2, transportation.
E2, transportation. I will give this to Dr. Thornton.
Pretty succinctly, we have one section, one change in the middle of the policy. Do you have the copy? Forgive me. Just a clarification. Thank you. Essentially, articulating that all students are eligible for one bus stop location. And also, we did have a discussion about being mindful that there are some cases where the superintendent has the ability to, where possible, offer some flexibility. But we just wanted to kind of articulate the one stop, one family concept.
I just want to add that, again, the need, this is another funding issue, quite honestly. Because in the past, we were able to be a little looser with this policy. However, with buses being as tight as they are with the capacity, we just don't have those seats available just to say we're going to do things. This is another situation where when we get into the start of the school year, people could petition Dr. Thornton, and he can make a determination, working with the transportation folks, to see if those seats are available. What this really does is just gives him the leeway to make decisions on a case-by-case basis.
We have a motion to approve E2, the E2 transportation policy. Do we have a second for discussion?
Second to discuss?
Second by
For
Mrs.
discussion.
Feather for discussion.
I'll turn it over to Ms. Rogalski first.
I just have a question. I have no problem with the policy. Let me just make that clear. How will it be determined which address for those families who have 50% custody? Is that going to be determined by bus availability? Or will that be a parent choice? Or in those situations, where does the 50% custody? I'm just curious for those families that live with that.
Typically, parents designate which location would be the spot. That's something they have to work out.
Right. I just want, because that also will determine, I mean, unless they're very fortunate that both parents live in the same building district, they would have to choose which school they would probably want their kid in.
I just want to say that I'm very happy to see that also, that we're including the flexibility for Dr. Thornton to be able to do things at his discretion as well. I think that was definitely missing last year before we had amended that, so thank you.
As you recall, last year, we did have the conversation. After we did the flexibility conversation, in the end, I think I was able to assist maybe 9 or 10 families.
Any other discussion? Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Fiorello, a second by Mrs. Feather. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? It passes 6-0. Thank you, Mr. Fiorello. Next, we have discussion and/or vote to approve resolutions. Mr. Collins.
Good evening. We have 12 resolutions, and I know you want me to read them all individually. But unfortunately, I'm not going to tonight. I can tell you, they all passed fiscal subcommittee 2-0, and I would move passage to the entire committee for SCPR 2022-4, all the way through item number 12. I was gonna read them, and I quit mid-sentence. I'm sorry, I didn't commit. So anyway, the 12 resolutions passed fiscal 2-0, and I would move passage to the full committee.
Mr. Collins makes a motion to approve the resolutions, item 1 through 12. Do we have a second? Second by Ms. Smith. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? It passes 6-0. Thank you, Mr. Collins.
Welcome.
Next item, discussion and/or vote to approve payment of bills.
All right, we have payment of the bills in the amount of $2,036,781.18. And out of that, I got good news. Ms. Feather, $95.50 are coming back to you, kid. School bucks refund. Your kid graduated. Yeah, Alex is going to write you a check right now. So congratulations on that. You are almost $100 richer. But payment of the bills did pass fiscal 2-0, and I would move passage to the full committee.
Mr. Collins makes a motion to approve payment of bills. Do we have a second? Second by Ms. Smith and Mrs. Rogalski. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? It passes 6-0. Next item on the agenda is school committee comments, school liaison reports. Any comments from the school committee? Mrs. Rogalski.
I just want to say that I'm excited to see, and I wish Mr. Collins had read it out loud, the purchase for playground equipment for community school. I know that has been a recurring topic of discussion, and I'm happy to see that that is in there, and so hopefully that will be settled soon.
Yeah, and I think the big thanks goes to Mayor Mutter. I didn't want to, I know he's kind of bashful, I don't want to say he's bashful. I was going to give him credit, but I wasn't sure if he really wanted that, so he's very humble. So, yeah, the town has agreed to help us with capacity. You really, also a big shout out goes to the PTO up at the Community School Association got the ball rolling. My kids aren't a community anymore, and unless I drive by there, I had no idea the dire condition I drove over there. So the playgrounds are going to be fixed, and it's huge. It's a huge help, and I think it's just something we can all agree on. People use the playground. School's not in session right now. There are kids playing on the play. We heard kids during executive laughing outside. It's a good resource that the town has, and I do believe that Cumberland truly is a good place to play, and from young kids to older kids, and it is a tremendous help. So thank you very much for pointing that out.
Any other school committee comments? Okay, the next item is vote to go into executive session. I don't believe we have that tonight.
We do not.
Dr. Thornton, okay, next item is a motion to adjourn. Second, motion by Mr. Fiorello, second by Mrs. Feather, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? It passes 6-0. We are adjourned to 8:36 PM. Thank you.